Mr. Timur Suleimanov, First Deputy Chief of Staff of the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan and Chairman of MC12, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General of the WTO, Deputy Directors General of the WTO, fellow ministers, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. It is with the deepest honor that I deliver this statement on behalf of the governments and people of the WTO members of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS. At the outset, let me state that the OECS is aligned with the statements by the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and Jamaica on behalf of the CARICOM and ACP groups, respectively. The OECS takes this opportunity to renew its commitment to a more viable and durable multilateral trading system with the WTO at its core. As small island developing states and small vulnerable economies, OECS countries are exposed to a high degree of economic openness, often with a heavy reliance on imports, especially to meet our food and energy needs. Furthermore, we have narrow production structures, a limited range of exports of goods and services, and face persistent susceptibility to external shocks, such as the current global COVID-19 pandemic, food and energy crisis, and supply chain challenges. These shocks tend to impact on us more severely, and our recovery time tends to be much longer compared to larger and more advanced economies. Of course, it would be remiss of me not to mention the daily lived reality of the threat of climate change and natural disasters. The impact of these threats can and do bring all economic activity to a standstill when they occur, including our ability to trade. Even as we contend with these challenges, we have seen a reduction in trade preferences, concessional financing, and development assistance. Some argue, and quite erroneously so, that our status as middle to high income countries should exclude us from having the policy space and tangible assistance required to pursue our development interests. These arguments do not take into account our inherent vulnerabilities. It is in this context that we call the spirit and letter of the Marrakesh Agreement, which recognizes that, among other things, our trade and economic relations should be conducted with the objective of sustainable development, and that we must ensure that developing and least developing country members secure a share in the growth in international trade commensurate with the needs of their economic development. Our deliberations at MC12 and after must return to the spirit of the Marrakesh Agreement. As a matter of priority, we have to seek to strengthen and not undermine the policy space that we need as developing countries to practice our development. Before I close, I want to state that the OECS looks forward to meaningful outcomes on a range of issues at MC12. After negotiating now for over 20 years, securing a meaningful agreement on fisheries subsidies is essential. In addition to drastically reducing harmful fisheries subsidies and practices, this agreement must have at its core, as per our mandate, appropriate and effective SDT for developing countries and least developed countries. In this regard, a small players exemption and a carve-out for artisanal fishing are critical to the retention of our policy space to further develop this sector. Agriculture remains central to our economies, and we are very disappointed at what appears to be a low level of ambition for an outcome package in this area. Nonetheless, we will contribute meaningfully to any future work program across the various agriculture pillars. The OECS is also hoping that other ministers can join us in agreeing to a decision which exempts purchases made by the World Food Programme, WFP, from export restrictions. Additionally, in light of long-standing challenges to our food security, which predate both the pandemic and more recent disruptions to global food markets, we are also looking forward to joining a consensus on a food security declaration. We certainly welcome the fact that one of the early harvests of MC12 achieved since last year was a ministerial decision on the work program on small economies, which contains elements geared towards aiding our fuller integration into the global economy. In areas such as the intellectual property waiver for COVID-19 vaccines and the WTO response to the pandemic, the OECS sees outcomes in these areas as key. The final point I will raise relates to the reform of the WTO. We need to strengthen the operations, rulemaking, and negotiating functions of the WTO. In this vein, the OECS supports a multilateral reform effort which is open, inclusive, and transparent. We also call for the restoration of the two-tiered dispute settlement system and ask the member concerned to withdraw its blockage on the appointments to the appellate body. The OECS looks forward to a successful MC12 and will play a constructive role in ensuring that we achieve meaningful outcomes across all negotiating areas. Mr. Chairman, I thank you.